afternoon. You'll give me a cue when my presentation is up. I'll just start in the meantime. Good afternoon, everyone. As the moderator has introduced me briefly, my name is Thembi Lekganyane. Good afternoon. You'll give me a cue when my presentation is up. I'll just start in the meantime. Good afternoon, everyone. As the moderator has introduced me briefly, my name is Thembi Lekganyane. I am from Transnet SOC, and I'm standing here in the capacity of the Interim Infrastructure Manager, which is a new division within Transnet that has been formed that is going to manage open access, basically, and manage the infrastructure going forward. My brief for the discussion was just to give an overview on where we are with the journey to establish the infrastructure manager, and also on the journey of rail reform, which is the umbrella concept under which the infrastructure manager is being formed. And just to give a little bit of insights in terms of how train operating companies who are interested in participating on our network can enter the network. So with the little time that I have, I'm gonna try to compact a very complex and long topic into the 5 minutes or 10 minutes that we have been given. And then I should be able to then take questions at the end of the session. Is it up? Okay. All right. If we can, is there? Thank you. All right, starting with just briefly, I think those who are familiar with our South African network and that do follow Transnet would be aware of the size of our network and just the landscape and what it covers. We have about 30,000 kilometers of track, 20,000 of which is actual route kilometers. Out of that 30,000, out of the National Rail Policy, we have then been asked to rationalize it, which the exercise that was done together with government then has given us two types of the network that we have split the network into. One, we call it the A network, and the other we call it the B network. The A network is the network that we see as core and that is economically viable, that in terms of rail reform and then going forward, and in terms of the National Rail Master Plan, that will be the network that we see as the network that will be the most active and that will be economically viable. And then we've got what we call the B network. So the A network is about 12,000 to 13,000 kilometers of track, basically, that is within the scope of open access that we are talking about. And then we've got what we call now the B network, previously known as short lines and branch lines. The B network contains low density track, basically, short lines as well as branch lines, which currently some of them are under concession, some of them are not being utilized, some of them are being earmarked for closure and that type of thing. So this network, if you read the national policy, the National Rail Policy, is the network that government is earmarking also to do PSPs on, and that it will collaborate together with Transnet and the infrastructure manager, which is the interim IM at the moment, to then develop a strategy, separate strategy for it, and then see what type of PSPs we can put out this network on. So the scope of our discussion in terms of open access going forward will then be on the A network. And just to then backtrack a little bit in terms of where did all of this start? I take it that people that are in the room are quite familiar with the rail environment and what is currently going on in the South African environment. There was a national rail policy that has been in development for the last 2 decades at least. And back in 2022, this national rail policy was approved by Cabinet to be implemented. And following that, this year, June, the Economic Regulation of Transport Act was also gazetted. Both these documents paved the way basically for the rail reforms and where the South African rail network system needs to go. And they basically are the Bible and the foundation under which the infrastructure manager will operate. In December 2023, government also then published what they call the Freight Logistics Roadmap, as well as the PSP framework. So together, these 4 documents basically form the foundation of how the infrastructure manager is going to work. And for the last 4 years, we've basically been working with governments to then set up this infrastructure manager. The ask really for government in these 4 documents is that Transnet needs to separate itself into an infrastructure manager business as well as a train operating company. Rudzani, my colleague, will be talking about the future of the train operating company in the context of the developments that we are discussing now in terms of what will then happen going forward once the infrastructure manager is formed. The other thing that the National Rail Policy and the ERT Act talks about is that Transnet must then open access, which will then be managed by the infrastructure manager. And then it must set up the infrastructure manager, which is why we are also here. The last thing that is critical is that the rail must then be regulated. It must be regulated through this Economic Regulation of Transport Act, and that government will appoint a transport regulator, a TER, Transport Economic Regulator, that will then regulate the process of how we manage access. So off the back of that, we then set up this structure. The responsibilities of the infrastructure manager are quite straightforward. Once the separation has happened, the IM's responsibility is then to make sure that the network is fully maintained. The IM's responsibility is to also make sure that it sources the necessary funding that is required to maintain the network, and then also publish slots, on the network for train operators to take up where they are interested. This is train operating companies both within the region and within the region, within South Africa and the region as well. We are also expected to submit a tariff application to the regulator going forward in terms of the pricing and the charging of access. That will be regulated through the ERT Act. So just like with the electricity and other network businesses, we are then expected to make an application in terms of the tariff to the regulator, and then the regulator is then gives their approval or suggest a tariff that they believe is going to be palatable for the market. So we've started that process, as you will see later. And then we are then expected to then provide third-party access. I spoke to the issue of funding as well. Then the infrastructure manager is also then expected to manage traffic, control rail traffic on an ongoing basis, and deal with the issues of billing as well. And then I think it goes without saying also that the protection of the network as well falls within the ambit of the infrastructure manager. Just in terms of the journey, we introduced the interim infrastructure manager structure in October last year to basically kick off the process with the interim regulator, so 2 interim structures. The interim regulator is also a concept that has also been introduced in the National Rail Policy. IREC is currently the interim regulator that we are dealing with. So this interim infrastructure management structure was basically set up to then make sure that this process then gets kickstarted and the process of applying for the tariff and getting ready for open access starts. In March, we had to publish the network statement. The network statement is available on the Transnet website under the Infrastructure Manager tab for public consultation, and you will see in the copy it clearly indicates that it's for public consultation together with the IREC. The IREC then facilitated a process of information gathering from the public just to gather insights in terms of what the public is saying about our initial draft. We are also cognizant that that process was quite a closed process, and there's quite a number of stakeholders that may have not participated in that process just purely from timing and a lack of knowledge of that process was underway. But our network statement is currently online, and stakeholders can still engage and ask questions. We've got I will also share the email address that you can also ask questions if there are any. So we are still open for engagements in that regard. The plan was that the draft network statement then gets published, and then the public consultation processes then happen, which are facilitated by the interim regulator. And then from there, Transnet then gets given an opportunity to update the network statement. And then based on whatever the final price the regulator then gives us, we will then publish a final network statement. We are targeting to publish by October this year, but the process is totally dependent on the interim infrastructure, the interim economic regulator finishing its process of assessing our application. That process also deals with the issues of funding. So in case our tariff is too high, they will then have to also advise in terms of how do we then deal with the required funding to make sure that the infrastructure manager can provide the capacity that is required. So in terms of our timelines, we are looking at towards October, from October onwards, to be able to open access. But yeah, we will keep everybody up to date. If you can just stay close to our website also for more updates. I will not go through those processes, the IREC process that I've just explained now. I'm just looking at time, moderator, as well, just indicate how much more time we've got. I think we will also share the presentation pack, but I think it is important to also share with you just the state of the infrastructure and in terms of capacity that we have, because that's a question that we often get in terms of our readiness to open access. So we just want to upfront be honest with everybody in terms of where we find ourselves in the journey. We are starting the journey basically as TFR and as Transnet. So in terms of the capacity that is available, we will start off with the current operators that are currently on the line. I think one of the questions that I often get is what happens to current contracts, and from the region perspective, what happens to those current arrangements. We will honor those current arrangements. The Economic Regulation of Transport Act does allow us to do that, but there will be a process once the regulator has been appointed, where we will actually have to review everything and declare all the contract. So we are starting a process now. We've started a process of engaging our current customers and our current stakeholders on that. And then in terms of the region as well, we will set up specific sessions with our stakeholders across the borders to actually discuss and deal with any concerns that people might have. So the plan is to then open access and charge access fees. The access fees are then to be used to fund the network. There will also be PSPs, options for PSPs, where inquiries are put to the infrastructure manager to supplement the capacity requirements as well. We are also engaging government in terms of government funding in this regard. So what will happen is we will open access where there is current capacity based on the current financial situation of TFR. Okay, yeah. I think I should just wrap it up here. If you want more information just with regards to the application process and you are interested in operating trains on the network, everything is available online in the network statement, and the process as you see it on the screen, we also elaborated on it quite extensively. And as I said, we are available on email, infrastructuremanager at transnet.net, if you've got queries and if you'd like to maybe even set up appointments for us to talk to you a little bit more about the process. I think I will stop here. Thank you.